The alarms at Fort Hope Research Facility pierced the Montana night with an urgency that Dr. Sarah Chen hadn't heard in her 15 years of service. She sprinted through the underground corridors, her lab coat billowing behind her as she made her way to the Central Command Center. The facility's subterranean location, carved into the heart of the Rocky Mountains, had always felt like a fortress of science and discovery. Tonight, it felt like humanity's last line of defense. "Talk to me, James," she called out as she burst through the reinforced doors. Colonel James Harrison stood before the facility's main display, his weathered face illuminated by the pulsing red of emergency lights. "We've got something, Sarah. Something big." He gestured to the massive screen where a series of complex mathematical patterns scrolled endlessly. It started broadcasting these sequences 30 minutes ago. "The signal's origin point is..." He paused, double-checking the coordinates, approximately 300,000 kilometers from Earth. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. After decades of searching the stars, of sending messages into the void, something had finally answered. And they were practically on Earth's doorstep. "Have you initiated first contact protocols?" she asked, already knowing the answer. The protocols she'd helped design were clear: observe, analyze, and under no circumstances respond without proper authorization. "We're following your playbook," James replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "But there's something else you need to see." He pulled up a second display, this one showing thermal and gravitational readings from high orbit. "Whatever's up there, it's bleeding energy like crazy. The patterns are consistent with severe structural damage." Sarah leaned closer to the screen, her mind racing through possibilities. "They're not just making contact," she whispered. "They're asking for help." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's first contact with an alien civilization wouldn't be a diplomatic exchange or a show of force. It would be a rescue mission. "Ma'am," a young technician called out, her voice trembling with excitement. "We've managed to decode part of the mathematical sequence. It's a language primer." Sarah moved to the technician's station, her eyes scanning the decoded patterns. "They're teaching us how to communicate," she breathed. "And they're doing it with remarkable efficiency." The aliens had somehow determined humanity's basic mathematical understanding and were building upon it rapidly, creating a bridge between their languages. Colonel Harrison approached, his expression grave. "Sarah, I need your recommendation. Do we respond?" She straightened up, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. "James, if we don't help them, whatever damage their ship might come looking for them. And then we'll have first contact with something far less friendly." She took a deep breath. "We need to respond, but we do it smart." The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Sarah led a team of linguists and mathematicians in crafting a response, while the facility's engineering division prepared for possible emergency landing scenarios. The alien vessel, they learned, housed just over 300 refugees from a civilization that called themselves the Nexari. As dawn broke over the Rockies, Sarah stood in the facility's massive hangar bay, watching as massive doors above slowly opened to the morning sky. The Nexari ship, now visible to the naked eye, descended with surprising grace for its damaged state. It was roughly cylindrical, its silver-blue hull marked with strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the early morning light. "Beautiful, isn't it?" James said, coming to stand beside her. "But what I can't figure out is why they chose us. There must be more advanced civilizations out there." Sarah smiled, remembering something in the Nexari's transmissions that had struck her. "They didn't choose us for our technology, James. They chose us because they'd been watching. They saw how we handle disasters, how we run toward danger to help strangers, how we adapt and survive against impossible odds." She watched as the ship touched down with a soft hum. "They chose us because, in all their travels, they'd never seen a species so determined to help others, so resilient in the face of adversity." The ship's hull split open like a flower blooming, revealing a ramp that extended toward them. Sarah took a step forward, ready to make history, when James caught her arm. "Sarah," he said quietly, "what aren't you telling me about their messages?" She hesitated, then met his eyes. "They're running from something, James. Something that's been systematically destroying civilizations across their galaxy." And now, she looked back at the ship, where tall, elegant figures were beginning to emerge. "Now they think we might be the only ones who can help stop it." As the first Nexari ambassador descended the ramp, standing nearly 9 feet tall with iridescent skin that seemed to capture and reflect the morning light, Sarah Chen realized that humanity's greatest test was just beginning. And somehow she knew that we would rise to meet it. 3 weeks after the Nexari landing, Fort Hope had transformed from a secretive research facility into humanity's first interspecies command center. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the newly converted cultural exchange hub, watching as human scientists worked alongside their alien counterparts. The Nexari moved with an otherworldly grace, their tall forms gliding through the facility's corridors like living sculptures. Ambassador Talara, the Nexari's lead diplomat, approached Sarah with the fluid movement characteristic of her species. "Your people continue to surprise us, Dr. Chen," she said, her translated voice carrying a musical quality that no human throat could produce. "We expected fear, hesitation, perhaps even hostility. Instead, we find enthusiasm and determination." Sarah smiled, remembering the world's reaction to the news of alien refugees. There had been fear, of course, but it had been overshadowed by an overwhelming desire to help. Humanity has a long history of taking in those fleeing persecution, Ambassador. It's part of who we are. Indeed. Talara's iridescent skin shifted to deeper blues, a sign Sarah had learned indicated deep thought. "But there is something you should know about the enemy pursuing us. Something we haven't shared with your military leadership yet." Before she could continue, alarms blared throughout the facility. Sarah's tablet lit up with urgent messages. Multiple objects had just appeared at the edge of the solar system, moving at impossible speeds. Colonel Harrison's voice crackled over the facility's speakers. "All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Dr. Chen and Ambassador Talara to command immediately." They rushed to the command center, where chaos had erupted into controlled military precision. The main screen showed dozens of small objects hurtling through space, their trajectory aimed directly at Earth. "Scout ships," Talara said, her skin paling to an almost translucent white. "The harvesters found us faster than we anticipated." "What exactly are we dealing with?" James demanded, his eyes fixed on the approaching threats. Talara's next words chilled the room. "They're not just destroyers of civilizations, Colonel. They're collectors. They preserve what they consider valuable and eliminate everything else. Their technology is far beyond even what we Nexari possessed at our height." Sarah studied the tactical display, her mind racing. "But you said they've never encountered humans before. They don't know what we're capable of." "Correct," Talara confirmed. "Your species is an unknown variable. That's why they're sending scouts first." A young lieutenant spoke up from his station. "Sir, the objects are deploying something in orbit. Thousands of small devices spreading out in a grid pattern." Sarah moved to a secondary screen, analyzing the data. "They're conducting a systematic survey, testing our defenses, our technology, our biology." She paused, noticing something odd in the readings. "Wait, these energy signatures, they're familiar." She pulled up the original scans from the Nexari ship's arrival. "Look at this. The Harvester's technology. It's using the same basic principles as yours, Ambassador, just more advanced." Talara's skin rippled with patterns Sarah had never seen before. Impossible. Unless, she turned to address the room. "There is something we discovered just before fleeing our home system. We believe the Harvesters might be." She struggled with the concept. Evolved versions of ourselves. From a possible future. The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Sarah's mind whirled with implications. That's why they're so interested in preserving certain civilizations. They're curating their own timeline. James stepped forward. "But why attack other civilizations? Why not just preserve everything? Because, Sarah realized, they must have learned that too much diversity, too many competing civilizations, leads to some future they're trying to prevent. They're pruning the galaxy like a garden. A new alarm sounded. The scout ships had launched their first attack, targeting a small research station in lunar orbit. The station's defenses, designed to handle meteor strikes and space debris, proved surprisingly effective against the alien weapons. "Did you see that?" Sarah exclaimed. "Their weapons, they're calibrated for their level of technology. They weren't expecting such simple, robust defenses." James was already moving, issuing orders. "Get me every major military command on the line. If we're going to survive this, we need to think differently. We can't match their technology, but maybe we don't have to." As the command center erupted into activity, Sarah caught Tilera studying her intently. "You're not afraid," the ambassador observed. "Oh, I'm terrified," Sarah admitted. "But humans have a saying. The best defense is a good offense. And for the first time in your conflict with the harvesters, we have something they don't expect." "And what is that, Dr. Chen?" Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. "The element of surprise. They think they know everything about how civilizations develop, about how species think and fight. But they've never met humans before, and we're about to show them exactly why that was a mistake." Above them, humanity prepared for its first interstellar war. While in orbit, the Harvester Scouts continued their methodical survey, unaware that they were about to encounter something their advanced technology and careful calculations hadn't prepared them for: human ingenuity. The main Harvester fleet arrived exactly as Earth strategists had predicted, through the same corridor of space their scouts had used. What they didn't expect was to find that corridor filled with thousands of small, crude satellites, each broadcasting on different frequencies, creating a cacophony of signal noise that effectively blinded their advanced sensors. In Fort Hope's command center, Dr. Sarah Chen watched the massive holographic display as the enemy fleet stumbled into humanity's first trap. "Sometimes the old ways are the best," she muttered, remembering how they'd adapted World War II radar jamming techniques for space warfare. "Primitive but effective," Ambassador Tilera observed, her skin shifting through shades of impressed purple. "Though it won't hold them for long." "It doesn't need to," Colonel Harrison replied, his voice steady as he coordinated with military commands worldwide. "Just long enough." The Harvester ships, massive crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, began methodically destroying the jamming satellites. But each destruction released clouds of debris, simple metal particles that created even more sensor interference. It was like trying to see through a sandstorm made of mirrors. "Multiple ships have broken through the interference field," a tactical officer reported. "They're launching attack craft. Estimated time to Earth's atmosphere: 15 minutes. Sarah moved to the primary tactical station, where a complex model showed the placement of Earth's defensive forces. The plan they'd developed was audacious, possibly insane, but it played to humanity's strengths. While the Nexari and presumably the Harvesters relied on advanced technology and precise calculations, humans excelled at improvisation and controlled chaos. "Launch the drones," Harrison ordered. Across the globe, thousands of remotely piloted aircraft took to the skies. They weren't the sleek, advanced drones of modern militaries, but rather stripped-down platforms carrying simple but effective payloads. Each was piloted by someone who'd spent countless hours playing combat flight simulators. Gamers turned warriors who could think creatively and adapt instantly. The Harvester fighters encountered Earth's atmosphere and immediately demonstrated their superiority, moving in ways that defied conventional physics. But they'd never faced opponents who'd learned combat maneuvers from video games, who didn't follow standard military doctrine because they'd never learned it. "First engagement in Sector 7, the tactical officer announced. The screen showed a squadron of drones executing impossible moves, sacrificing themselves to force Harvester fighters into the path of ground-based weapons. "They're adapting," Tilera warned, her skin pulsing with concern. "Their tactical AI is learning our patterns." Sarah smiled. That's exactly what we're counting on. She turned to Harrison. Colonel. He nodded. Initiate Phase 2. Across the battlefield, Earth's forces suddenly changed tactics completely. Drones that had been acting independently formed into tight squadrons. Ground forces that had been holding defensive positions began aggressive pushes. Everything they'd done in the first phase had been a carefully crafted lie, teaching the enemy eye to counter tactics they never intended to use for long. Multiple harvester vessels are descending through the interference field, the tactical officer reported. They're charging what appear to be main weapons. Now we see if Dr. Chen's theory was correct, Harrison said quietly. Sarah held her breath. Their entire strategy hinged on her analysis of harvester technology. If she was wrong, Earth's major cities would be the first casualties. The harvester ships fired, their weapons releasing beams of energy that should have vaporized everything in their path. Instead, they dissipated harmlessly against Earth's atmosphere. It worked, Sarah exclaimed. Their weapons are too advanced. They're calibrated for shields and armor far beyond what we possess. They pass right through our relatively primitive materials without transferring enough energy to cause significant damage. The command center erupted in cheers, but Harrison quickly restored order. Don't celebrate yet. They'll adjust their weapons. We need to press our advantage while we have it. Tellara moved closer to the display, her movements betraying her agitation. This is unprecedented. Never in our encounters with the harvesters have their weapons failed so completely. That's because you fought them on their terms, Sarah explained. You tried to match their level of technology. But humans, we're still using projectile weapons and combustion engines alongside our most advanced tech. We're not fighting up at their level. We're dragging them down to ours. A new alert sounded. The harvester fleet was repositioning, their formation changing into something new. They're adapting faster than we anticipated, Harrison announced. All forces, prepare for Phase 3. Sarah watched as humanity's hastily assembled defense forces prepared to execute their most daring gambit yet. They'd bloody the enemy's nose, but the real fight was just beginning. The harvesters weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to preserve their own future, and humanity was proving to be the chaos factor that their careful calculations had never accounted for. Dr. Chen, Tellara said softly, I begin to understand why my people were drawn to Earth. Your species doesn't just think differently. You reject the very notion that there are limits to what you can accomplish. That's not entirely accurate, Ambassador, Sarah replied, watching as the battle continued to unfold above them. We see the limits. We just choose to treat them as challenges rather than boundaries. Above them, humanity continued to prove that sometimes the best way to fight the future was with lessons from the past, and that determination and creativity could be more powerful than any advanced technology. Deep in Fort Hope's labs, Dr. Sarah Chen stared at data scrolling across multiple screens, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. The battle for Earth had reached a stalemate. Humanity's unconventional tactics had prevented the harvesters from gaining a decisive advantage, but they couldn't drive them away either. Something about the enemy's behavior nagged at her consciousness, a pattern she couldn't quite grasp. You should rest, Ambassador Tellara said, entering the lab with her characteristic fluid grace. The Nexari's skin had taken on the deep blue hues of concern. You've been analyzing this data for 36 hours straight. I can't, Sarah replied, rubbing her eyes. There's something here, something we're missing. The harvesters, they're not just collecting civilizations. She trailed off, her tired mind refusing to complete the thought. Colonel Harrison's voice crackled over the intercom. Dr. Chen, Ambassador, we need you in command immediately. We've intercepted something you need to see. In the command center, the main display showed a strange transmission. Not the usual tactical data or weapon signatures, but something far more complex. The signal pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost familiar. We captured this when one of their smaller ships was destroyed, Harrison explained. It was a tight beam transmission aimed at their flagship, but our jury-rigged quantum sensors picked up an echo. Sarah moved closer to the display, her exhaustion forgotten. This isn't just data, it's genetic code. Massive amounts of it. She turned to Telara. Ambassador, does this pattern look familiar to you? The Nexari's skin rippled with shock. It's impossible. That's Nexari genetic data, but altered, evolved. Not just Nexari, Sarah said, her fingers flying across the controls. There are fragments of genetic codes from dozens, maybe hundreds of species, all modified. All. She stopped, her eyes widening. All optimized. Optimized for what? Harrison asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. Survival, Sarah whispered. The harvesters aren't just preserving civilizations. They're trying to engineer the perfect species, one capable of surviving something catastrophic. She looked at Telara. That's why they're really here. They're not trying to prevent a future. They're trying to ensure one. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. How does this help us? Harrison finally asked. Sarah was already moving to another console. Don't you see? Their entire strategy is based on optimization, on finding the perfect solution. But humans, we've never been about finding the perfect solution. We survive because we find thousands of imperfect solutions and use them all. She pulled up battle footage from the ongoing conflict. Look at how they fight. Every move is calculated for maximum efficiency, but efficiency isn't always effectiveness. They literally can't understand our seemingly illogical tactics because they've optimized that capability out of themselves. A weakness, Harrison said, straightening. But how do we exploit it? Before Sarah could answer, new alarms blared. The harvester fleet was moving, but not toward Earth. They were converging on a point in space, their ships forming a complex geometric pattern. They're preparing something big, Telara warned, her skin paling. This formation, it's similar to how they destroyed my homeworld. Sarah studied the pattern, her mind racing. No, not destroyed. Look at the energy signatures. They're not charging weapons. They're creating a resonance field. They're going to try to force us to evolve, to optimize us whether we want it or not. Harrison was already issuing orders, mobilizing Earth's remaining forces. But Sarah grabbed his arm. Wait, this is it. This is our chance. Their ships are locked in that formation, all their systems perfectly aligned, optimized for maximum effect. And, Harrison prompted, and optimization has a fatal flaw. It assumes perfect conditions. The slightest disruption to their pattern could cascade through their entire network. She turned to Telara. Ambassador, you said the Nexari ships use quantum entanglement for communication. Do the harvesters use the same technology? Yes, but far more advanced. All their ships are quantum-locked, operating as a single entity. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Perfect. Colonel, remember how we used simple metal particles to confuse their sensors? What if we did the same thing to their quantum field, but with targeted quantum interference? Understanding dawned on Harrison's face. We don't need to destroy them. We just need to introduce enough quantum noise to disrupt their perfect synchronization. Exactly. And I know just how to do it. Sarah turned to the tactical display. Have every remaining drone and satellite broadcast this frequency. It's not elegant, it's not optimal, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to be chaotic enough to break their pattern. As the orders went out, Sarah watched the harvester fleet, hoping she was right. They had one chance to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in finding the perfect solution, but in embracing imperfection and turning it into an advantage. Above them, the battle for Earth's future, and perhaps the future of all species, was about to enter its final phase, and it would be decided not by who had the most advanced technology or the most optimal strategy, but by who could adapt when everything went wrong. The quantum interference plan worked better than anyone had dared to hope, and worse than anyone had feared. As Earth's remaining forces broadcast their chaotic signals, the perfectly synchronized harvester fleet began to falter. But rather than simply disrupting their formation, the interference triggered something far more profound. Their quantum network is collapsing, Sarah announced, watching the cascading failures spread across the enemy fleet. But these energy readings, something else is happening. Through Fort Hope's reinforced windows, they could see strange lights flickering in the sky. Temporal distortions caused by the failing quantum field. The harvester ships were phasing in and out of normal spacetime, their perfect synchronization shattered by humanity's deliberately imperfect attack. Multiple temporal signatures detected, a technician called out. They're splitting across different time streams. Ambassador Tellera's skin had taken on a completely new pattern, one that seemed to mirror the chaos above. "You've done more than disrupt their formation," she said, her voice filled with awe. "You've broken their temporal cohesion. The future they came from. It's unraveling." Colonel Harrison moved to the tactical display, his face illuminated by the shifting patterns of temporal energy. "What does this mean for us? For Earth?" Before anyone could answer, a new signal cut through the chaos. A transmission from the Harvester flagship, but unlike anything they'd seen before. The message displayed across their screens, translated in real time. "We see now. We understand. We were wrong." Sarah stepped forward, her hand steady as she opened a channel to respond. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth. We're willing to talk." The response came not in words but in images, visions of a future where entropy itself threatened to unravel the fabric of spacetime. The Harvesters had evolved to fight this fate, believing that only a perfectly optimized species could survive the universe's heat death. They had spent millennia collecting and preserving species, trying to engineer the perfect solution. "But there is no perfect solution," Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. "That's what you've finally realized, isn't it? The very act of trying to create perfection was dooming you to failure." "Yes." The response appeared in all languages simultaneously. "Your species, imperfect, chaotic, beautiful in its variation, has shown us another way. You thrive not despite your imperfections, but because of them." The temporal distortions began to stabilize as the Harvester ships adjusted their quantum fields to a new configuration, one that embraced variation rather than perfect synchronization. In orbit, their crystalline vessels began to change, their rigid geometric patterns flowing into more organic shapes. "They're adapting," Tellera observed, her skin shifting to colors Sarah had never seen before. "Not optimizing, adapting. Like you humans do." Sarah moved to the main console, her mind racing with possibilities. "We can help you," she transmitted to the Harvester fleet. "Not by becoming perfect, but by showing you how to embrace imperfection. How to find strength in diversity rather than uniformity." The response came as a ripple of energy that swept through every computer system on Earth, leaving behind not destruction but understanding. The accumulated knowledge of countless civilizations, freely shared rather than forcefully preserved. "You offer what we have sought for eons," the Harvesters communicated. "Not survival through perfection, but evolution through diversity." Colonel Harrison stepped forward. "And what happens now? What about the future you were trying to prevent?" The answer appeared as a complex series of equations that made Sarah gasp. "They're not showing us a single solution," she explained. "They're showing us millions of possible solutions, each one imperfect, but together." She looked up, her eyes shining. "Together they create a network of possibilities, each supporting the others. Like humanity itself." Over the next few hours, the Harvester fleet transformed from an invasion force into something entirely new. A collective of ships and minds dedicated not to optimizing the galaxy, but to preserving and celebrating its infinite variations. They would still face the challenge of entropy, but now they understood that the solution lay not in perfection, but in the endless adaptability of life itself. As the temporal distortions faded and Earth's first interstellar war came to an unprecedented end, Sarah stood with Tellera and Harrison in Fort Hope's observation deck, watching the transformed harvester ships gleaming in Earth's orbit. "You know," Sarah said, "when I was a child, I used to look up at the stars and wonder if we ever be ready to join a galactic civilization. I never imagined that our very human flaws would be what made us not just ready, but necessary. Your species has given the galaxy something it desperately needed." Telera replied, her skin shimmering with joy. "Not perfection, but possibility. Not optimization, but adaptation. Not a single answer, but endless questions." "And now?" Harrison asked, looking at the ships that had so recently been their enemies. Sarah smiled, watching as the first joint human harvester Nexari research teams began their work, preparing to face the challenges of the future together. "Now we do what humans have always done. We adapt. We improvise. We overcome. And we do it not by becoming perfect, but by remaining perfectly human." Above them, the stars seemed to shine brighter, as if celebrating the dawn of a new era, one where humanity's greatest weakness had proved to be the galaxy's greatest strength.